So this is an oral history interview for the Lafayette Historical Society Oral History Project. The interviewer is Ryan McKinley. The date is August 5th, 2015, and the time is 11 o'clock a.m., and we are in the Historical Society room. So if you could state and spell your name for the record.
Okay. I'm Dorothy Walker, D-O-R-O-T-H-Y, Walker, W-A-L-K-E-R, and I was the past president of the Historical Society.
Could you state your parents' names as well?
My parents are Paul and Angela Broadhead. Angela was a early founder of the Historical Society and was their secretary and editor of their newsletter.
Okay. And were they originally from Lafayette?
No. We came as a family in 1956 in May, and my brother and I spent 1 month at our respective schools at that time. Stanley for me and Lafayette Elementary for my brother.
Coming here, could you tell me a little bit about what you remember about the town in 1950 at that time?
I remember very little of the town, other than the every main traffic went through Mount Diablo. The freeway had not been opened and was still under construction. And I do know of various buildings that have changed, and all like the Safeway was much closer to the curb originally, and then probably in the mid to late 60s was moved back away and the parking was moved forward. There was Franco's Florist and Pitar's was on the corner of Oak Hill and Mount Diablo. They were very distinctive buildings. And Bill's Drugs was on the corner also at Oak Hill and Mount Diablo. It subsequently became CVS. Well, I was at Stanley, and of course, Lafayette Elementary has been there for forever, basically where it is now.
The CVS where it is now, is that where the drugs was before?
No, it was at Oak Hill and Mount Diablo. I mean, it didn't become CVS for quite some time because Bill's Drugs, it was a different pharmacy even before then, but Bill's Drugs was there, and it moved to the current location where CVS Drugs is now on Mount Diablo, by Mountain View.
And Dewing and those areas.
Dewing, I think, yes.
When you first moved here, where did you live?
Where I live again today, I purchased the home from my mother, 965 Yorkshire Court, here in Lafayette. It's an older section of town. When we were there, when we first came, the railroad was still running through the town, and subsequently in the mid-60s again. Well, it was early after we moved in that the actual train stopped, but it wasn't until about the mid-60s that it was converted to the trail, the Lafayette-Moraga Trail that it is today. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of exciting. Usually once a day the train went through. And we walked along the tracks to Stanley School, and but you knew when the train was coming. It was pretty regular, so it was not a big deal.
And that area when you moved in, was it very rural or was it developed? Or?
No, it was pretty much developed. The only thing that wasn't developed was the area where there was the one stop for the train in Lafayette, I believe, which was a gravel material, various gravels and dirts. I don't even remember the name of the company that was there, but they would offload gravel and sand at that spot. And right now, and then subsequently, all that when the company was gone, then they built like 6 houses in that space on Moraga Boulevard. So my home is very close to Moraga Boulevard, but a challenge to get to because there's no cross-through that's close by.
And as a child, you mentioned walking along the tracks and things like that. What are some of the other things you did while you were growing up?
Well, I was in 8th grade when we came. So I then, after that summer, moved on to Acalanes. And we were lucky enough to have a pool, which was one of the reasons why my family purchased the house in Lafayette, was because both my brother and I were quite upset about leaving our former location and all our friends. So we spent most of the summers in the pool, to be sure. It is no longer a pool. I have subsequently filled it in.
Do you remember why you came to Lafayette?
Yes, we had been living in San Rafael when the ferries were still running, before the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, and my father had taken a job at the Berkeley Radiation Lab. It's subsequently been renamed the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and the commute was difficult at times because of the ferries. So he wanted to move somewhere where it was easier to commute to and from. And Lafayette seemed to be a good place at that time. So, for whatever reason, I don't know the reason they chose Lafayette, but I did look at the subsequent mortgage, and in 1956 they paid $18,500, or their mortgage was for $18,500 at the time, which is kind of interesting because I now have the same home and it is worth a considerable amount more. I purchased it from my mother in 1987. So at that time, I paid a little over $150,000. So in the 20-odd years, that it also increased quite a bit, as all Lafayette values have.
And did your mother continue to live in Lafayette after?
No, she moved on to Rossmore and has stayed there until her death last year at 97.
Could you tell me a little bit more about her involvement with the Historical Society?
Well, she was working part-time in the library and was part of the Friends of the Library. And then a number of people discussed and formed the Historical Society because they felt that the library had become somewhat of a repository of information about the city, and they just wanted to ensure that subsequent information was kept. And so I think it took them about 3 years to get their status as a nonprofit. And or maybe it wasn't a nonprofit then, but to formalizing requirement with the state took them a little while. And my mother wrote the newsletter, was the editor, and she also, over time, did the windows that brought various collections of the members together, and she helped design the layout of those displays. And it was done at what is going to be the Walgreens drug. So it's up by Upper Happy Valley Road near the Wells Fargo. But it was down, and it was part of a bank offered the space for them to have displays. And I don't remember the name of the bank at this time, but they were there for many years. And we have pictures in the archives of some of those displays. And I know they took from various members, old heirlooms of various kinds. I remember one most distinctly, which was old Valentines and postcards, and that was kind of sweet and all. But it ranged from farm equipment to household goods to clothes and so forth. That was one of the things that she enjoyed a lot as well. I don't think she had any problem with writing and did that. And she continued to be a member for, I guess, until she left Lafayette and was involved. And she was the one that got me involved in being a member. And then later, Marshall Duncan, who is still, I believe, the vice president, asked me to come on the board. And subsequently, by default, I ended up being the president. And at that time, we were beginning to worry about what it would take to get our space in the new library, how we would get it organized, and what was involved. And so that got us to do some inventorying, and we had been very lucky to have a number of our memorabilia stored with the Contra Costa Historical Society in Martinez, and they had given us space, and so we had to go over there and do some of the inventorying. We got a lot of information from them regarding how we should handle our photo collection, and so it was very helpful that we got others who'd gone through some of it before. And we also worked on trying to find a software that would help us do some of the inventorying, or once we had inventoried, putting it down in a format that was useful and consistent with other museums. And we also did negotiated with the city regarding how we were to utilize the space in our lease arrangements, and so we got everything started, pretty much what was necessary for that. I don't think there was anything that anybody else couldn't have done, but it just did sort of fall to me, and we organized in various groups, and so there is an archive group that assesses any donations, and there are people who help with the displays up in the main part of the library. That was one of the things we negotiated, was a certain space so that the people would know to come to the library room. I mean, the history room right here. And we worked also when the library was beginning to open, as in a joint meeting with the other groups. Mostly, of course, it's the Friends of the Library, and also the foundation worked with the city, and then their I think it was their contractor. I'm not sure that it's still a contractor who handles the management of the building, and just on issues as they came up and what our concerns were once we got the space. So.
And that was about 2009,
right? Right at the beginning, the transfer, all of that was happening. We went to the city council just to confirm that we were interested and were willing to sign and whatever was necessary, so that there was some testimony that was requested of us. Our archives had been in the old library, so certainly if there wasn't a space for us here, we probably would have continued. We would have just moved our things over to Martinez, I guess, the physical things. We Bill Ames, who formerly owned Bill's Drugs, had given us space to hold our paper archives and photos. And we did a lot of our early transcribing of the information from the backs of the photos onto software. And at his offices, which are above CVS. So that was also happening at the same time because we wanted to get as much of the background stuff accomplished when we were open for business, so that if people came in and asked for, old pictures of old homes or pictures of pioneers or whatever, we would be able to locate some of those, hopefully within easy reach. But I don't know what we would have done had there not been. Marshall Duncan had monitored the city council for years, insisting that there be a room here when the new library was created. And so I don't think there was ever really a question that we would not have a space. And also, the city had given monies to the Historical Society over the years to do various functions, and we had worked with the city on the 150th, the sesquicentennial, and so I think there was a long ongoing relationship with the city, and the space, although not everything we would have liked, is, way, way above a small little closet in the old library. And so we were delighted when we were offered the space and found what it was. And we're happy, I think. So I don't think there's anything more that's nuanced about it. Just that we were very busy and we met regularly, as in weekly almost, I think, in the summer before we opened up.
Going to go back to your mother for a little bit. So when she was starting it, that was in around 1960, 61, is that correct?
Yeah, I would guess. I really don't know the time. I was too busy as a teenager, I'm sure, to worry about what my mother was doing with her. But she always loved history, and so I think it was a natural thing for her to get involved. She was also involved in AAUW, American Association of University Women, and worked to get scholarships for women interested in science and math. And that's the only other thing that I remember her getting involved in besides the library. She really enjoyed her job a lot. She worked part-time and worked not only in the Lafayette Library, but over time she had worked in Moraga and Walnut Creek libraries as well. I think they rotated them on some basis.
When the libraries are probably smaller than they are now. Or something
I think they're quite a bit small. Well, in fact, when we got here, the library was only a two-room. It was an older home, which was essentially two rooms. Have you seen the pictures of that? It's really... it was probably 700 square feet or something like that. It was just that small. And it was there for, probably 5 or 6 years before the new one was built on the same location. And that was, phenomenal in terms of the size. And of course now, and it became inadequate very quickly. But this one is probably going to be the same in due time. But it is remarkable how many people do use the facilities. So we're really pleased about that. As a library taxpayer, I'm delighted that so many people do use it and the types of programs that are available. So that was another thing that we began Every year there was always a speaker at our annual potluck, but then because we had a lease and we began a speaker series on issues about the area, and so that brought in some funding for us. Back to my mother. I don't know that they just had dues at the time that she was a member, and I don't know that she did a lot of the photos, trying to keep those and clipping the newspaper articles and so forth that were related to people here and or the city. So some of the materials that are here were from her, and others that work regularly at trying to, maintain the ongoing history of the city.
Did she do? You mentioned she did some interviews as well. Did she do oral histories as well?
She did lots of oral histories, and she went to a class, I think, with Betsy Wilcutts, and I don't remember who else she talked about, but yes, she spent quite a bit of time. I think that was later on. She became more interested in the oral histories, and not only did she do the interviews, but then she also did some of the transcripts. I think most. And another one of our members, just before I came on board, had those tapes converted to the CDs, which are around somewhere here in the archives. So her voice is immortalized, I'm guessing.
If you could tell me what your memories of Acalanes and what that was like, and how you think it's changed and things like that.
Well, I remember Acalanes. It was very big relative to the school that I had come from in San Rafael and Stanley that 1 month. I was the new kid on the block. Most of the people in my classes had been in together, so I had made acquaintances from my neighborhood, but that's about all. I worked relatively hard at doing all the university prep classes at the time, and was an okay student. Anyway, it was enough to get me into Cal, and so I'm grateful to Acalanes for that. I don't think I got involved particularly in any of the activities that were offered by the high school. So I was pretty much involved in my own stuff, whatever that was at the time. And so I don't have any standout memories except for Friday night footballs, and I think I did go on a ski trip or two with Acalanes, but I don't remember anything else.
As part of like a school excursion?
Yeah, I think it was somehow organized by the school. But and then the class that I enjoyed the most was the physical ed, which was a modern dance class. I was able to do that, I think, for 3 of the 4 years, so that was kind of a nice thing.
Who was the teacher for that?
Millicent Hamburger. Now that you mention it, she's probably the only name that I remember of all of my teachers. So, and she was honored in one of the subsequent annual, that you get every year from, and she had been there for 50 years or something like that. So a pretty remarkable woman. And one of the nice things that the History Society got was from another teacher who I also had, now that I think of it, and her name was Miss Nichols, and she donated all of her yearbooks, the annuals, to us. So we have the complete collection up to 2001 or 2, I believe, and hopefully we've been able to get some subsequently. I don't know.
And those went from when up to?
About 19... I think it was 1950 or something like that. I mean, she was one of the first teachers. And another one of the teachers that was a longtime member of the Historical Society, Ruth Dyer, who was the secretary, longtime secretary for the Historical Society. And almost all of the... what do you call them? When you have a meeting, the agendas and all of the reports from meetings are all done in her very small handwriting. But we translated a lot of that, or transcribed a lot of that writing so that we kind of know what was going on over the years that she was. So, in fact, I do remember a couple more teachers. And it was a very well-rated high school at the time. And so many of us went on to universities.
Did you take a bus from where you were?
No. Somehow there was carpools. I know for at least 3 years, but I don't remember how I particularly got there. But other than a couple of years, we did carpooling, and of course, everybody got their licenses at 16, and so we were able to drive fairly early on. So.
Did you do summer jobs or anything like that?
Not really. I did, I think, my senior year, but otherwise there was nothing available or nothing that I was interested in. Whatever. My parents were indulgent, and maybe babysitting, but nothing serious. My brother was able to do more jobs. He's 2.5 years younger than I was, but. And he worked with my uncle, who had a farm job. He had orchards in the Central Valley, so he was more involved and he was also on the wrestling team. I remember that. So it was good to have all of that hard labor. Had to keep his weight down, which was an important aspect of the team.
What are some of the big changes you've seen over your course in Lafayette?
Well, I think sort of the gentrification, I guess, and of course the biggest change was the freeway coming through, so that changed sort of the character of the city, and the city certainly made decisions about keeping it rural, semi-rural, as they like to say, so now downtown has changed quite a bit, in terms of the number of apartments and that are, or now I guess condominiums are coming in and evolving the whole character of the town. I think it's probably. I was just going to say about backing up for my mother. I know she got involved in when the city was trying to incorporate, both because she was involved in the Historical Society and it was a major event, but I think she favored getting the city to have more of be more responsible for itself and so forth. And But I think that was one of the things that changed the city a lot. It was when it became incorporated, and I believe that was in '68. So I went away after Acalanes, I went away to school and got married shortly thereafter. So I wasn't really back in the area until 1970. So that's when I think a lot of the changes for the city occurred in that same time as the incorporation and the being able to make their own decisions as to, whether to allow high-rise buildings, whether to do the building on the hillsides and at the tops of ridges. And those, I think, build the character for the city, is the decision to keep it just suburbia.
May I ask, what year did you graduate high school?
60, and then I graduated from college in 64.
Oh, okay. And then you didn't come back till about 1970 after college?
Well, I came back to Berkeley,
Oh.
so that wasn't exactly Lafayette, although I would visit the family and so forth.
And then when did you come back to live in Lafayette?
87. That's when I purchased my home, my mother's home, my family home.
Do you miss anything about the way Lafayette used to be, or any specific area?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a wonderful town, and the fact that they involve so many people in the process of change. And I actually at one point was on one of their commissions. It came to be known as the Circulation Commission. It was sidewalks, trails, and something when I first joined. And so we would meet monthly and discuss issues of how to move around and through the city and so forth. And I did that for about 7 or 8 years, and then became so busy with the starting of the library that I excused myself from that. And then after we were pretty much settled here for about a year or so, my mother was not doing, health-wise, was not doing well, and I needed to spend more time with her, and that's when I let go of the reins, so to speak.
A couple more questions about your mother when she was founding the original society. Were there a group of people that she was working with, or was it she was kind of on her own?
Oh, there were definitely members who they had regular meetings, and again started the potluck, annual potluck, which was held at the time right here in this spot with the American Legion Hall. They had their annual meetings with speakers, and I think the membership probably ebbed back and forth, but there was always a very serious core group of people who were involved, and I know she helped find the speakers. She organized who would do what. She was a very organized lady herself. So, it really was her most serious involvement in the kinds of things that she did on a regular basis.
Do you remember any of the people she worked with, like a close friend or something like that?
Oh, well, I know that Ollie Hamlin was one of the first people who, I believe his name is actually on the incorporation papers, and so she would have known them. Ruth Dyer, again, was always involved, and she lives in the city, so that was no problem for keeping in touch. Chris Schneider, who was one of the presidents at one time, and she was also, I don't know what her exact title was, but she was involved with the cemetery, and she was still around a year or two ago. Marianne Hoisington has been a longtime member of the group. I'm trying to remember the woman who was really the organizing force for whom the Friends of the Library, I believe, named their room. Drawing a complete blank as to her name. But I know my mother kept up with her for a very long time. And the Wilcotts, who are, Betsy still helps here, as you know, and I'm trying to remember, I believe she also got involved with the oral histories, and her husband helped with some of the organizing around the software, because and putting some of the photo information on software on the computer. I'll think of a few more, I'm sure, but right now that seems to be the majority of people. I can name the members on my board, but I don't know that they were original members with my mother.
Okay. And this is my last question. If you have any hopes or visions of what Lafayette may be for the future, or what you wonder will happen?
No, I don't. I do intend to stay here for as long as I'm able, and will probably get involved with a new organization called the La Miranda Village, which helps seniors stay in place. Mm-hmm. And they help find needed services of various kinds to help with the place. And I believe the city is encouraging that organization. I guess as someone who grows older and stodgy, I pretty much like the way it is. I think the choices that have been made over time, keeping the suburban aspects of the city, I think are really important, and the involvement of the community itself in so many activities, a lot of which are involve the library as the meeting place. But it's just a great place to come and be.
Interview ends at 11:40.